Okay, Yves, yeah, could you tell us? So you were born in France and you served as a second lieutenant in the French First Parachute Regiment. Is that correct?
How many free fall jumps have you done?
Free fall, but so I free fall jumps outside of the army, probably 150-ish. It's the equivalent of jumping from the first floor of a building. It's so incredibly violent. Like I had to do like skydiving to just cure myself from like the physical fear of hitting the ground from the military. We would go see VCs and they would tell us, we love the company, we love you guys. However, we hate construction with a passion. Like they're saying every cool company in this space, company with great founders, amazing products, gets acquired for less than 100 million.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks and Bytes podcast, where we dive into construction and AEC technology. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode. Doki. Okay, Yves, thank you. We finally managed to get this one on the table. So welcome. Thanks for coming on Bricks and Bytes. Nice to see you.
Good to see you both. Glad we could set this up. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Yves, yeah, could you tell us? So you were born in France and you served as a second lieutenant in the French First Parachute Regiment. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, first question then. How does military background lead to success when building construction tech startups? And for people that don't know you, you are the founder and now executive founder of Fieldwire to Hilti. So I'm pretty sure our audience will know that. But just
Okay.
How many free fall jumps have you done?
Free fall, but so I free fall jumps outside of the army, probably 150-ish. And military jumps, those are the jumps where they drop you super low and you hit the ground like a
Static line, yeah? Static line.
yeah, static line jumps. But those are so incredibly violent. I've done like 11, I think. But every time you hit the ground, you become probably like half an inch shorter. Like it's the equivalent of jumping from the first floor of a building. It's so incredibly violent. Like I had to do like skydiving to just cure myself from like the physical fear of hitting the ground from the military. Like
wow.
it's so surprising. Like I remember my first jump and I was overconfident. I'm jumping from the plane, beautiful day, go down, and then the ground accelerates way more than I was. I hit it so hard.
Yeah.
Like it was very surprising. And then you learn to really tense up before you hit the ground, and then you don't get injured. But it's crazy.
I've done some as well.
yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question later on about the lessons learned from this and how do you transfer it onto the business maybe. So
Yeah, I mean, like, so, but the army was a great experience. To me, it did two things. I think it gave me some pointers as to the kind of leadership I wanted to have with the company. And maybe I think the key piece is it told me about the fairness of leadership. Like in the army, like you have such a broad spectrum of profiles. And, you know, it's the army, like especially the infantry, like it's pretty rugged. You run people pretty hard. And I think whether a leader is accepted or not has less to do on whether they're nice or whether they're tough, but more to do is whether they're fair and consistent in how they operate. Like the rules are clear and it's the same rules all the time. And you see those guys doing super well, even if they can be pretty harsh, in the army. So I think that's something that I think will win all the time is just being consistent and being fair. And that's what I've tried to do over the 10 years of Fieldwire when I was CEO, while the job was changing a lot. So I think that was the first thing. The second thing I got from the army was when we were in maneuvers, like when we were training. I never deployed, actually. I almost went to Kosovo, but it was close to the end of my time. And so the unit left, but I had like 2 weeks left. So they were like, it's going to be hard to send you back to France before the end. And so when you're maneuvering, just without saying your GPS coordinates, just explaining where you are is so incredibly hard. And that's something we do in construction every day. We say like, oh, there's an issue over there. What does over there mean? You can try to describe it. The joke in the army is like by the trees and the two rocks, there's a million spots that would work like that. And so I think that was a small thing that, field communication is hard. And so maybe that's when I started thinking about that stuff. I don't know how critical it was to creating Fieldwire, but it's definitely something that I experienced there. And the last piece is becoming completely allergic to paperwork. Like there is so much paperwork in the army. It was like construction, like back in 08, like when I graduated college, I was like, that's one of the main reasons actually I didn't end up going to construction right after college. It's because I had been in the army and I pattern matched the amount of paperwork. And I was like, this is going to be a waste of my time.
Fair enough. I'd like the second point. I actually think there's still something to consider about over there. I was recently listening to the book that Jocko Willink done, and I think even as recent as the Iraq War, they had issues where they were like friendly firing on some of their own troops because the communication was not clear. And this is like elite units within U.S. Army. So fascinating points. Okay. So from the army, you moved to US, from France, you moved to the US to grad school and then joined Ubisoft.
Military service was actually the first year of my undergrad in France, because Polytechnique, the school I went to, has a military status. We've kept that since the French Revolution, which makes education free. So I did the army, went back to Polytechnique for 2 years, and then went to Stanford for grad school, civil engineering. The weird thing was actually graduating from Stanford in civil engineering. I mean, the plan for me from the get-go was I'm going to do big civil. I'm going to go build bridges somewhere in the world. That was my plan. And then I was like, okay, like I love construction, but I just hate the freaking paperwork. And so I was like, okay, what else can I do? And so I was like, where would they value somebody that has an engineering background, that has done a little bit of, management in school, quote unquote. And so gaming was one of those spaces. And so they gave me a team from the get-go at Ubisoft. I interviewed at a bunch of gaming company and startups. They gave me a team from the get-go. And so I was like, all right, let's do this. This sounds pretty fun.
Yeah. And I think that when we discussed before, you mentioned that gaming, you can get the background gaming brought you a lot of insight and perhaps was a contributor to the success of Fieldwire. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. So what did I get from gaming? So first of all, I think as a startup school, as a product school, gaming is incredible. Games are products that have no utility other than being pleasant to use. And fun it's this completely elusive thing to chase. So as a product person, it makes you develop two things. It makes you develop a lot of confidence that you have a vision and you're going to try to chase it and develop it and try to see if it actually works for people. But it develops also a lot of product humility in terms of sometimes it's very clear for you and you put that in the hands of a gamer, of a user, and they just don't get it. Like famously, I think there was a level in Halo where the level design had a big hole with some light at the bottom. And it was just a hole. And if you jumped in it, you would die. But like it was so attractive to follow the light. Every single player would jump. And so they had to just put some boulders in front of it to block the hole when they released the game. But so game has so many of those moments where it's crystal clear for you and you put that in front of a customer and they just don't get it. And so like that's a great product school. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing was the tools we had in gaming studios to manage the team were just light years ahead of what I had seen in construction. And so you think about tools like Jira, Trello, Basecamp, like all of those collaboration tools, like the collaboration space was way ahead. And I think that's really where Fieldwire comes from. It's seeing those tools and being like, okay, if we could put that on mobile, like that would be like just completely game changing for construction. Like I remember, like I started at Ubisoft in 08. That's the iPhone coming out in 08. So at first, iPhone is a luxury product. It's not very clear whether everybody's going to get a smartphone, but the more time passes, the more that becomes clear. And at some point, like I really remember feeling like there's this tidal wave that is going to be mobile. that's going to change
Oh.
construction in the same way the computer, made those giant like engineering firms like full of drafting tables obsolete, and then like now everybody's working on a computer. So I think that was the second thing. And the third thing, I think maybe we can talk about it later, is gaming went from like being like a box product business where you just had relationship with Walmart and that's how you distributed your product, to being a digital business where nobody actually buys a physical game. You download it, or you just get hit by an ad online, or you just get retargeted, whatever. And so towards the end of my time at Ubisoft, like I was already waiting to start Fieldwire, like actually was waiting for my green card to complete. I was already programming on it. Like probably the first line of code of Fieldwire was probably around 2011. And so at the end, I told them, like, I'm not signing up for another 3-year cycle on a project. I'm going to help you like in other areas. And at the time, they were setting up all the performance acquisition team, like basically the people running payback and stuff like that. And so I set that up for them. And that's how I learned to just run ads and just drive traffic and understand how to make that work economically. So surprisingly enough, there was no plan to learn all that stuff and then start Fieldwire, but that's what ended up happening. Like, it's the Steve Jobs. You can't connect the dots forward. Just like do what you're interested in, and then most likely the next thing you do is a combination of the skills you've acquired, right? So that's really what happened for me.
Yeah. Okay. So, how then did it all there? Where did you get the spark of inspiration or idea, or where did Fieldwire come from? Was it a conversation with a co-founder, or?
Yeah, was it to tackle the bureaucracy, the paperwork, or something else?
So once again, I think it's a combo of experiences. So my parents like remodeled like houses, like that's something that was a big part of our life. We were always living in those just big mansions that used to be like a derelict farm, and they would redo it and then they would sell it and we would move to somewhere else. And so I had seen basically my parents with like just those binders of like photos, and it's like photos of like plumbing and photos of electrical, and just those giant binders of, just residential like remodeling projects, right? And so I had seen kind of like the non-digital version of that, like really the physical version of doing like punch list and project progress, on residential projects. And then maybe that's what led me to probably just go in that general space. So I think that was one. I mean, of course, like all those experience from the army to being a trained civil engineer to being at Ubisoft, like were critical experiences as well. But I think I remember a good discussion with one of my buddy, like Tanmay Akala, who was a PM at DPR at the time, or field engineer, I can't remember. And he was like, he was running a punch list on a super big site, and it was like too hard to just go back to the office. And he was like, I put a cart, then I put a computer on it, and I connected that to a camera, and now I can just take a photo and inject it directly in a file. And it was like, the way he described it is like, this is incredible, right? I was like, this is terrible. Like, we should do that on the phone, dude. And so, like I have a lot of friends in construction that were actually active at the time. And I was like, okay, like it feels like mobile has the potential to change all of that. And so that's probably where we started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's a similar time to around PlanGrid. I have an answer on there, on a question on that as well. But when for you, Yves, did you notice throughout like the journey of Fieldwire that you were onto something? Where were there like a few key events that happened throughout the journey? You're like, okay, we're building something pretty good here.
I think
how did you get initial customers as well?
Yeah. So I think there's two ways to look at it. I think you never quite know if you've made it or not. I mean, until like you IPO or somebody acquires your company or whatever, nobody has really just paid for the value of your company. So there's a lot of things that are a little bit virtual. You're like, you feel like you're doing great, but you don't know if you're actually doing great. So I think
valuation.
I mean, valuation is always good. Revenue growth, I think, is probably the closest proxy. Like, I've seen friends, for example, because we went to an incubator. So we have a lot of people that started companies at the same times as us. And you see sometimes company gets stuck at like, I don't know, like a million of revenue or 3 million of revenue. And that's okay if you're on your like 2 to 4. But if it's been like 6 years and the company just can break past that point, I think there's probably a moment where you tell yourself, like, is this really a good business? Or at least it doesn't feel like a VC fundable business. So for us, I would say there was this checkpoint every year where we just kind of like checked in with ourselves, like, how are we doing versus the expectation of how well we thought we were going to do. And I think that's the first part. But the doing well, I think it's over the years. At first, I think there were like maybe like 10 companies that were just that we would have looked at that were competitors, and then there were 5, and then 2 years later there's like 3, and like I think we kept doing better and better. I think the name recognition was good, the brand recognition was good, like, and I think people appreciated what we did. So you get all that clarity every time you talk to a customer. You get an absolute clarity on whether what you're doing is good or not. You might do it at a very small scale, but if a customer that feels like an informed customer tells you, like, this is amazing, by the way, I know all of your competitors, we've tried all of them, and we want to go with you, then you have something.
Was it like a combination of a great product? Because yes, we have heard that it is a lovely product to use, and secondly, a very good go-to-market. I know you're very strong on demand gen and product-led growth. But these are two things that, like, the catalyst, so to speak, of what would form what Fieldwire became and now is.
So I think that's true. I think the thread that ties those two things together is the field orientation. I mean, it's in the name, Fieldwire, but I think we've always been probably the closest to the craftsman and craftswoman out there, out of the tools you can buy, out of the major tool that you can buy. And it's easy, like for many of the customers, or if you look at the space from afar, it's easy to be like, aren't you guys like PlanGrid, or aren't you guys like Procore, or things like that? It's the same as like, what's exactly the difference between a Ferrari and a Lamborghini, right? Like, but if you get into like the actual psyche of the product, they're very different product. And so I think Fieldwire is very much that. So in our mind, the space of project management was a space that had been done with the computer and internet, right? I mean, like, where Procore is a way older company than Fieldwire is, right? Like, they existed for probably 10 years before we even started. And so when we started, we said project management has been reasonably well solved by like Procore, but there were just plenty of other companies, maybe regardless of how well they were doing it. And we're saying that the space that is really open is field management. It's bringing tech to like the foreman and the craftsman on site. And that's what mobile allowed, right? And so the question was, what is the right product for those guys? And is it even going to work? Because it's super obvious today, but back in 2013, like, if you told people like, yeah, of course, like a plumber is going to have a smartphone in its pocket, they would laugh you out of the room. Like, they would be like, you're crazy. Like, that's never going to happen. So I think being right about that tidal wave, I think, was a big thing. And the second thing is, how do you get to the person that sees the value? And obviously, it's not a top-down sell. I mean, at least for us, that didn't make sense. And we're like, the way I buy stuff is I like to try it. I like to experience the value. And then if I'm convinced, then I get it. And so that's really how we approached it. And so back in 2013, very few people knew how to do, everybody would build like an outbound team. Like, that's what everybody did in SaaS back in 2013. And we're like, we don't know anything about the outbound playbook. However, we're pretty good at running ads and driving product from gaming. And so that's what we did. And it worked extremely well.
Who were the ads targeting?
So in general, like, we don't target personas, we target use cases. And so you try to target what we call intent. And so it's somebody looking for like a punch list tool, or like a field scheduling tool, or stuff like that. Like, those are the keywords that really drive the type of profile. And then once you have those people, then you figure out whether they're the right, just customers for you. So it's really like just kind of like you're casting a wide net, and then the net is very effective at selecting the people that we should talk to. So we don't, especially at the start, we didn't talk to everyone that signed up on the product. We would talk to a very minor subset of people, like maybe 10, 15% of people.
What's the ad strategy about driving people to the website or landing page or something?
No, I mean,
and then converting from there?
It was super basic. it's like we would drive people to the homepage of the website. At the time, for us, like the team was so small that we were like, let's have a great homepage. Let's not even try to do a landing page. Landing page is usually an optimization on the relevance of the target, and so it's just Google values you more because your keyword matches the name of the landing page. So we would drive people to the homepage, and the homepage was really designed to drive signups. And then people would sign up, and then we would score them based on how hard they were using the product. And then they would light up on our dashboards, and basically we would do. At first, we actually didn't talk to people; like they would convert on their own on the freemium, and then the freemium would convert to a paid plan. And then we started setting up an inside sales team that would call the first 10%. Then we grew, then we started calling like the first 20-25% of people that would score on the app.
So the first customers were through the ads, or do you?
Yeah,
you
100%. So that was the crazy part. Like actually, I remember. So one of my buddy had a company, and the first dollar they made, like they took the dollar and they just stapled it on the wall, and he told his team like, remember that first dollar. And that was like a huge event for them when they told us at dinner. And so I was like, I'm going to do the same thing. And so first customer rolls in, we just turned on monetization, basically like the payment in Fieldwire to upgrade to a plan. First guy checks in within, I think, an hour or two of that. And I'm like, guys, remember that first dollar? I stapled it on the wall, and then we look at who that person is. And that person was like a researcher in a lab that was mapping his freaking lab equipment. And I was like, okay, let's not forget about that first dollar. We're going to count the second dollar. Like that was kind of weird.
Funny.
But yeah, basically all the first customers were like that. And interestingly enough, we didn't start growing in the Bay Area. Like in the case of the Bay Area, you already had like kind of like a bunch of existing companies that were selling, basically field selling in the Bay Area. So it was probably the most saturated space in the US. But we started blowing up in Atlanta, in Canada, and like stuff like that. And so the fact that we had these, not like our strategy wasn't really attached to our location, just made us do well in all the areas that were underserved at the time. And then from there, we used that as a reference point to grow everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So possible to grow a business in construction tech starting similar way through like paid ads, or market is different now?
I think the market has changed. So back in 2013, the ad space was very, it wasn't that early because Google had been running ads for a while, but it was still pretty, you had to be knowledgeable to do it well. And so like Google didn't help you with targeting. They didn't help you with just conversion actions. So there's a lot of things that you had to do on your end for this thing to work well. And nowadays, Google does that for free for you. Like, for example, you say like, I only want to pay if somebody signs up and completes, their sign up form or like their first action in the product. And so at that point, you really don't have to do that much. Like they're doing most of that for you. And so I think any marketing team today can run Google pretty well. What's the result of that is there is not as much arbitrage in the market that there was in 2013. In 2013, you didn't get a lot of support in terms of being effective with your ads. And in the construction space, nobody really knew that much about ads. So back then, I can remember like economically, it was incredible for us because we were in a rich company when we started. We had raised like $1 million. I think we ran like a 3 to 5K just a month's marketing budget, which is not very much, but we would get like outsized result for it. Today I would look a lot more at social media and something like that as the new arbitrage, but even that is getting pretty competitive quick. So ads for us was the way to start it. It's still the primary driver of the business today. Like we've taken it extremely far and it's very, very efficient, but we're also very, very good at it. We're also like the team is very good at it. I'm not with the team anymore.
Yves, how did the product-led growth motion work then? You had I think you mentioned just now you had a freemium version which people would use, and then you would expand from there.
Yeah. So that's also something I witnessed in gaming. So in gaming, when I grew up, there would be like demos, and demos were the main thing. Like you would be able to buy a game, and it was a limited version of the product, or it was a limited time usage. And And then gaming invented freemium. And freemium is the idea that you can use the free version for as long as you want. And at some point, if you want to go past certain boundaries, you're going to have to pay for it. And that freemium expanded the market of gaming incredibly. Like it was proven to be a massively superior way to like distribute products when it's done well. So many people want to do freemium but do it horribly poorly. And so either they give out their product for free or basically it's hurting them from a distribution perspective. But like we had a very, very good understanding of how to do a good freemium. And so I believe fundamentally that was a way to expand the market, and that was the right way to distribute to guys that were close to the field. And so, yeah, so basically people would sign up and there would be like two main boundaries. It was like the number of projects you are running with us or the number of people you wanted on the platform. I think it was like 3 projects and maybe 8-10 people or something like that. And so that is exactly the amount of usage that you need to really prove to yourself that this thing is working for you or not. And of course there is some feature limitation, but for the most part, like that sandbox allows you to prove everything you want. And so our belief was that the customer is going to make their decision, and then after that they convert or they don't. At least that's the way we started, and we saw it work quite effectively.
Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
On that then, so yeah, I just want to ask how people typically, how and who typically signed up, and how that then went from like the foreman level perhaps all the way through to executive level. Because I'm guessing you would have need to hit that like true scale. You really need to be targeting like the like beyond the field.
Yeah, 100%. So usually, once again, it's anybody between, I think, a foreman, super, or like sometimes a PM in a company that looks at it. Sometimes we're going to have like a director of construction that is researching tools. And I mean, basically early on, it would be probably a little bit lower level. Then we would get a team on a site. Then from that project, we would get the entire project. And from that entire project, usually we would grow to several projects or a region. What's interesting is the way we grew with GC and subs was very different. So GCs, at least the larger organization, tend to be very organized by project or by regions that work quite differently from each other. So that was kind of a very project-oriented growth within customers, and then you get to capture the company nationally. Subs don't have that project organization. They're constantly moving labor from one project to the next. And so usually with a sub, as soon as we proved something that was good, like it would just catch fire and it would just expand extremely rapidly. So our sub expansion was always very brutal. We could go from 0 to an entire company within a year. With GCs, it would probably take a little bit more than that.
Interesting.
It's much more decentralized.
Martin, do you want to start your question again? Because it was muted when you started speaking.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think subs are much smaller companies usually, and also GC is more decentralized. More centralized, but not well connected. So that's why probably message travels much slower between those.
I think it's pretty true. There is, for me at least, there is a favorite size of company, like a company between, let's say, 150, 200 people to 500. I think that's the ideal customer for Fieldwire. And I don't mean ideal customer like we can't work with larger companies or smaller companies, because we have enormous companies with like multiple thousands of people on the platform, and we have really tiny companies that are using us and they're deriving value. But there is something unique about the value prop. And the value prop is you're encountering the first elements of scale. Basically, you have a big operation. You know, if you try to run it with like just paper and Post-its, like it's not going to work. But at the same time, the company is small enough that it has a few levels that like the big boss of the company is still very aware of what's happening at the operational level on site. And so usually that makes for extremely strong decision where not only that they can witness the thing, usually the CEO is going to call one of his like foremen on site, and be like, have you heard of this Fieldwire thing? Is it working? And they're like, yeah, it's great. Like, we should do it. And they're going to be like, okay, like, I know that guy, and that guy trusts you guys. And then we buy the product. And so when the company gets too big, that connection between the field and the decision makers that ultimately are going to cut the check is a little bit harder to make happen. But we've seen like crazy things like that so usually when we do big enterprise deal, like the way it works is at some point we need to elevate the conversation for the customer. And one of the ways to do that is to say like, okay, Yves is going to come on the call. Since we're bringing our CEO, can you bring your CEO on your end? And then you have a real discussion about what are we doing? If this works, let's put everybody on it. And that's usually the discussion. And usually in that meeting, of course, you're going to bring the most avid advocate from the customer side. And we had those like incredible meetings where the advocates just can't stop talking about the tool. And
Nice.
the CEO is like, hey, good, understood. It's just more expensive for us right now. I'm joking a little bit, but like that has happened a couple of times. And so, yeah, I mean, it's one of those moments where you're like, okay, I think we're really moving the needle for people right now.
Yeah.
Do you think? Go
Sorry,
on.
Mike. No, you go.
Okay. Do you think that Fieldwire provides the same value for a small customer as well as to a large customer? And I'm assuming if yes, then how did you manage to create a product like that?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. So what exactly is the value that Fieldwire provides? So we're in that space that's called collaboration. And I'm talking about beyond construction. There is this space called like just collaboration software. But you could say that Dropbox is a collaboration software. You could say that Slack is a collaboration software. You could say, and those are actually very, very different products. So the reality is there are 3 product class in the collaboration space that I've seen be very successful. You have file sharing products, like example Dropbox. And I would say like, if you take the construction space, I think PlanGrid with their orientation around plan was the file sharing product. You have task management product. I think you can take like Jira, you can take Trello, you can take a bunch of tools like that. The core of Fieldwire was task management, which is the organization of work at the daily level. And then you have like messaging product, for example, like Slack. You can do a messaging product. We didn't think that construction was uniquely differentiated from messaging product. It feels like you can use Slack, you can use WhatsApp, you can use a lot of tools. Sure, you can create maybe a verticalized product, but for us, task management overlaid on drawings was a very clear verticalization of the product. And so all those 3 types of tools do actually very different things. So file sharing is access to up-to-date information. But I don't think anybody would say, I organize my day on Dropbox, right? Go to Dropbox when you need something, but like this is not physically you don't go there to know what you do next. Real-time chat, I think is good. It's good for real-time interaction, but I don't think anybody's doing really anything super deep there or anything that really structures their day. And so for me, like there was that core belief that task management was the right collaboration product for construction. So what we deliver is that we deliver structured organization at the daily level on extremely large team. So can we deliver that to all company size? I'm remodeling my house right now. It's a single family house. And there are so many items flying in the air. I don't know how I would do it without Fieldwire. I have an enterprise license for Fieldwire just for me. This is amazing. I don't pay for it. Thank you for letting me have it. But even at a single family house project, it is helpful because it adds that organization. And the great thing is that whether you have 15 people or whether you have 150 or 500 on a site, it is designed in a way where that individual value is delivered. So I think it's valuable at all scale. Obviously, it's an optional value prop if you are only running 20 people, but it's a must-have if you have anything north of 100 people in your company. And so that's the thing. And then when you get to the very company, we get to that thing you were mentioning earlier where GCs tend to be very decentralized and regional. It's a huge problem for large companies that their different regions don't work the same. Like basically their Florida office works in a certain way and their California office works in a different way and their Texas office is different. And so that is not a value prop that we foresaw when we created the company, but that is one we realized over time, is every project of a certain type within a company is organized the same on Fieldwire. We have an entire thing of like templates and stuff like that. And our customers are like, this is so amazing. I can grab a PM from one project, move them across the country to another project, and they already understand how it's organized. And that's I think one of the biggest value for large enterprise customers is that consistency in how they work, and just making sure that they can ramp up projects faster.
So if I can follow up on this, we speak with quite a lot of founders who are focusing on, let's say, large contractors, large projects. Having all of this in mind that you said, what would be your advice for people when they are designing their product to perhaps increase the potential audience of their product? Or maybe it's a wrong question. Maybe they should be focused on this, the niche of large contractors, for example.
So that's a really good question. I think you can, I don't think there's a fundamental difference between a mid-market product and an enterprise product. I don't think the product difference is as deep as people think. What is fundamentally different is the way you distribute those. And so I think if you try, let me take the example of Fieldwire. Because we were digital and because we were targeting intent from the very, very beginning, we started getting enterprise customer, mid-market customers, and SMB customers. I would say like on a given month, we would probably get, I don't know, 60% SMB, 30% mid-market, and 10% large customer. Of course, like, it's a freemium product, so we don't have to talk to anyone. So we don't talk to the SME customers. They just go on the website, put their credit card, check out, whatever they want to do, they do. And basically, we're going to talk to the mid-market and the enterprise customer. Does that have anything to do with the product? It does not. And the reality is, from the get-go of Fieldwire, we started just basically actually having like large enterprise deal with customers. Our first enterprise deal, we had 5 people in the company, and that was a company-wide deal with a large GC. Because the product was working well. They were like, it does what we needed to do. This is great. We like the team. Let's do it. At the time, my co-founder and I would do the enterprise sales. So basically, like for that customer, like it was a big GC in Canada. They gave us a call and they were like, what would it cost to put everybody on it? And I remember we called one of our advisors, and he was like, are you guys stupid? Just get on a plane, buy a plane ticket, go to Canada, go see them. Like it's is done. And by the way, hi, and thank you for being amazing customers of Fieldwire. But so we flew there, 2 days of meetings. And I remember the night before the hotel with Javed, my co-founder, I'm like, we were planning to have a pitch like we do a regular customer pitch. And I was like, I don't think that's what those guys are going to care about. And so we completely reformulated the pitch into 3 big questions. And I think the questions was like, does it work? Like basically, does it work if you deploy it? Are you getting value out of the tool? The second one was, does it scale? Because big companies have small, big project, mid-sized projects. They have a lot of them. Like, does it actually scale with you? You're going to be able to put it anywhere. And the last one was like, does it return value? Like if we try to look at the math, what it costs versus what you're going to get out of it. And usually the game is we do an Excel spreadsheet and the customer puts the lowest number they can think of without being insulting. And it still comes out to like a 10x return on investment. And so that's the way it went. And so we had that thing, and on the way out, they were like, this is great. We love the product. We just weren't sure we were going to like you guys and so that's enterprise sales. And so fundamentally, the hard part of dealing with large customer is you're going to have to build a team of people that can have the discussion at that level. And those people are honestly pretty rare. So like from an ego perspective, I love large enterprise customers, and Fieldwire has many of them. But if you look at the bulk of the revenue creation, mid-market plus, like that 100 to 600 people company that I was talking about, and those are some of like the most impressive like quarters we had a ton of customers, and I personally knew none of the names. I was like, I don't know who this electrical company in Alaska is. I don't know who that plumbing company in the Midwest. I don't know who that low voltage contractor is. And then you know you have a machine that works. So I think the short answer to to this hard question is enterprise has a lot more to do, in my mind, with your distribution and your product.
It's very interesting. Yeah, like you're saying. So my thoughts
great
are,
points.
based on what you said, my thoughts are that it's very difficult to have successful go-to-market when you hire a bunch of salespeople and trying to tackle these large companies, because they might not be able to deliver the message like founder team can do, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, you flipped the message the night before the meeting, right?
So that's when we did our first enterprise deal. I mean, like just the idea of even visiting a customer was just beyond what we imagined at the time, like at least flying to a customer. Once we had that message, that's the message we ran consistently for the next few years after that. And yes, it's hard. So finding people that can really have like a complex talk at the strategic level. So what you find is that, for example, if you think about a lot of the people that come from the industry and that end up like in construction tech, and usually they're great advocates, they're great at talking to the project people. Only a portion of them can actually go talk to the execs of those companies. Because it's a different discussion. It's not about how great is the product, how much does it help you in the day-to-day. Like the exec management is going to ask one question. They're going to call their guys and they're going to say, do you think this works? Do you think it's good? And they're going to say yes. But then they're going to have another set of questions that has to do like, how much does it cost? Like, how would we deploy this? Like, just, is this going to be an adoption risk for the company? How do we integrate that? You know, they're going to have completely separate question, and you need to have a different team to address that. The last thing I can think about, and maybe on the product side, the only thing I would say is the stuff you do to optimize a product for SMB or mid-market or enterprise might be very, very different. And so I think that's why it's rare to see companies that are doing great on all three. It's basically a choice you might do. For example, if you do enterprise, you might do a product that maybe is a bit more customizable, or just like you might do stuff that is a little bit of a one-off for a large customer. If you start doing that, then you're going to ruin your deployability for SMB, right? That's an example of something that would optimize for enterprise, but that would hurt you for SMB, and vice versa, right? If you want to do SMB, you want super fast deployment, you know, which is great for simplicity, but that simplicity might not cut it for enterprise. So Fieldwire very clearly is at that middle point of like mid-market, medium, mid-plus, you know, like just hundreds of people. That's the core customer. Doesn't mean we can't serve the large ones. No, we have plenty of large ones. But just the reality is, if what you're expecting is a custom-made product, like that's not going to be us.
There's some great points. Yves, question about, so you mentioned a good thing about connecting dots, looking backwards, a very famous saying, but and it sounds like you got a lot of things right with Fieldwire, but I can't imagine it was just a linear curve upwards. So do you have like a testing framework or some kind of thing that you followed to test things before you deployed them? Like, how did you know something was worth pursuing versus scrapping it and going somewhere else and so on?
That's a good question. So product-wise, I think we like to use things ourselves first, and if it works for us, then there's a good chance it might actually work for the customer. So if I take an example, I think when we launched Fieldwire was just an app. It was just the iPhone, iPad app, and we had actually no website. The website was basically an admin portal that you logged in. Like, it was maybe a little bit easier to upload files and stuff like that, but we didn't expect people to actually work on web to do much. And very quickly we realized that was a wrong assumption. Like we had to be able to do at least the same and probably way more on the web. And so what we did for that is we started using Fieldwire to actually run the team internally. And so all the product development at Fieldwire was actually done in Fieldwire on web. Like, that was our Jira, like all our stories, all our feature development was there. And what that did is that the web got really good, really quick. And we knew it. And so the part that I think people underestimate is their own intuition as to how good or how bad something is. So I think maybe it has to do with some people have a hard time looking at their own work and just casting a reasonable judgment of quality on what has been performed. But in our case, like, usually if we have a feature, like I'm going to grab like 5 random people on the floor and I'm going to just show them a screen and be like, what would you do? How would you do that? And if all 5 out of 5 get it immediately, you're probably doing great. Like your customer, even if they're not a startup environment customer, has a shot at getting it right. But if you show something to 5 people and 3 out of 5 get it, you're probably in hell for a freemium product. Like, it's not going to work. So I think that's, in general, we're big believers in intuition, and we try to, if you can articulate the path of how this thing is going to work, then usually we're not going to let you do it, or we're not going to start doing it ourselves. And it's a very strong opposition. I've seen a lot of companies that work on what I would call a more optimistic approach. They say like, oh, we got to figure this thing out. And they just greenlight the project without having any idea on how it's going to work. So what's the result of that is, the failure rate is just much, much higher. So the threshold to greenlight projects at Fieldwire was somebody who's in charge of the project has to be able to explain roughly how are you going to do it and why is it going to work. And if you can't do that, then just think about it more and just come back with a better explanation. So I think that's a big thing. Does it mean we've done everything right? No, I think one of the big failure of Fieldwire was we never managed to get outbound running very, very well. Like we're a big inbound shop. Like we have like immense, like, ad buys with Google, and that's the core engine of the machine. And now with Hilti, we also have like the referral network of customers, which is why the business is blowing up right now. But there was a big thing that we tried to set up around like, 2019 to 2021 maybe, which was like an outbound motion. And we're like, okay, this is great. This is a way to reach like the later adopting market. We just could never do it professionally. It's a mix of having the right people, the right culture and stuff like that. I just think, just back to the tuning discussion we had earlier, that the company was so tuned for PLG and for inbound sales that it was actually hurting us to actually set up an outbound motion effectively. And so in the end, like, this is why the company kept being so reliant on inbound, and we solved outbound by just merging with Hilti, and that has been great. It was the right call. Like,
Well, you can't have inbound but outbound. You can't have everything.
yeah, exactly. But like, yeah, you always want more. That's the job of a family.
That's very true. Hey, so you hinted at a good topic perhaps to move on to, because time is ticking like they were doing these things. So, Hilti, tell us what happened.
So Hilti is super interesting. So Hilti is the kind of story that that is so special. So when we were doing the Series B, we were actually doing an inside round. We didn't even go to the market for the Series B because the company was doing great and investors were excited, and we're like, okay, let's not spend 6 to 8 weeks raising money. Let's just put a round together. And right around that time frame, Hilti visited San Francisco. Like they were doing a startup tour, like visiting companies and things like that. At that moment in time, Hilti has never invested like in a startup. That has never happened. And so wow. McKinsey, like the consultancy, reaches out to us and they're like, Hilti's in town. Do you want to meet them? The McKinsey office was like 2 blocks away from us. So we're like, sure, we can stop. Like it's really not a big drain on our time. And so we go to the meeting. The meeting is a little late. And so like the CTO's in the room is like, and so I asked him, it's like, what do you guys want to see? Let's, tailor the presentation to something that's going to be interesting to you guys. And it's like, well, to be honest, we're just here to learn. We're not here to invest. We're actually surprised that you guys are taking time out of your day to come see us. And they're like, why are you here? And I told him, like, we're here because we never know what comes out of those meetings. And so we do the meeting, and basically we talk to them about just craftsman productivity and like just the field. And the incredible thing is our pitch deck was the dream pitch deck of Hilti. Like it was basically you take tools and you replace that with software, and it was exactly that. And so the meeting heats up, like they're super excited. They're like, this is so great that we need a startup that believes in exactly the same thing that we do. And interestingly enough, by some random act of God, we had met some a Hilti team, like I think a year before, they were doing like a product that was built on an Android platform, and they were looking for apps to pre-install on their platform out of the factory. And so we had to send them like the Android version of the app. Just we had to deactivate the camera because there was no camera on their device. And so unbeknownst to us, we were the only app that was installed on this thing. And so at the end of the presentation, and basically the CFO, I think at the time that was leading the meeting, is like, we got to work together. And I'm like, well, we already work together. And then we have the last slide, which is their measuring device with Fieldwire pre-installed on it. I was like, this is your product, comes pre-installed with one app, and it's Fieldwire. And the guy's like, what the hell's going on? And walking out of that meeting, the CFO of Hilti was like, we want to invest in you guys. Is there any way we can do something? And we're like, we're actually closing our Series B. We would love to have you guys take a minor part of the round. And so that's how the first investment happened. Like,
Wow.
It's incredible. And at the time, we're
What a
really
story.
tiny. We're probably, I forgot how many we were, but we're probably, I would say, maybe 1 to 2 million of AR, like really, really small. And then we continue. Then the company just keeps going up. Then we do our Series C. Hilti doesn't invest in the Series C. And then, like, as we were about to do our Series D, and at the time we were pretty big, Hilti approached us again, and they were like, hey guys, would you consider coming to work with us? And it was an interesting time frame because for us, we're at that moment where we're like, we want to figure out the next engine of growth to really just go global. And we know how hard it is to start teams all over the planet, etc. And so we're like, okay, the thing that was interesting for us with Hilti was always the distribution reach, because Hilti is like 30,000 people just distributing direct to job sites. And so at that point, we had the conversation. The question was, how serious are you guys? I asked them, like, have you ever acquired a startup? They're like, never. It's just, I was like, we have to be honest with each other that the chance of success are extremely low. And what we said is, we're going to do 4 meetings, 2 meetings to discuss vision. You tell us your vision about software, we tell you ours. And if there's a vision match, then we do 2 meetings to see if we can come up with a price that will get this done. And 2 meetings of vision were great. Then I flew to the headquarters in Liechtenstein. Javid was talking to them from the US because he had a passport issue at the time. And yeah, in 4 meetings, we had a price. And then we did diligence, and it closed. And so I think it was an interesting thing for many reasons. For them, obviously, they were really interested about the software piece and acquiring a fully developed business that understood software deeply. For us, getting access to the Hilti reach, which we hadn't gotten from the first investment. Like, we had tried, but like, it's too hard to really get the sales org to work for you from the outside. Getting that and just getting a home where I think Fieldwire was going to live forever. I think that's my goal, to be honest. My main goal is that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, Fieldwire is just a major division within Hilti.
Nice.
And I think we're on that way right now. The team is just killing it beyond belief. So
That's awesome. I really like that story. Thank you for sharing. How long? Martin, oh, sorry, go.
I wanted to shift the gears slightly. So if you got something on the subject, please ask.
Yes, I do. How long did it take Yves, like an initial offer from them to close the acquisition?
I think we got the price done in July. Like that was the meetings. The meetings in Switzerland were in July, and then we had probably 3 months of due diligence. That's when they look at everything. And then after that, probably another 2-3 months to close. I mean, because it's a European company buying a US company, there's a whole bunch of laws around making sure we're not a strategic asset that is being bought outside the country, that kind of stuff. So I love that we're considered a strategic assets. The reality is, you just have to send the letter and wait for them to reply. And if they don't reply, then you're okay to sell the company. So yeah, it took about 6 months. So the really interesting part about the deal is the way we negotiated the deal is we said, it's called a lockbox. We said, we have a big discussion around Fieldwire and what it's worth and how much you're willing to acquire it for. And then the only question after that is that it's a yes or no. So we negotiated pretty much the entire framework of the deal before the due diligence. And then they could look at the entire company in fine details, ask us as many questions as they wanted for 3 months. That was the exclusivity period. And at the end of that time, it was either yes or no, but it wasn't like, oh, we're going to pay 20 million less, or we're going to change the price, or etc. So, and that was the key thing there is you negotiate your deal with the execs before the team gets huge for the due diligence and it gets messy. And that worked very, very well. I think Hilti actually did a really good job on that thing. If you look at, for example, companies like Autodesk, like I don't think they have an incredible track record of acquiring companies and retaining the team. Like Hilti was very, very, very good. The fact that they don't do software meant that they were very open about just, okay, what do you guys need to just keep operating that business? How much autonomy? How much funding you need over the next few years if we want to get to those targets? And it's just a lot of things that did right on top of being culturally compatible with Fieldwire. And so I think that worked very well. And so today, I really believe that we've probably had as much of an impact on Hilti, on the culture of Hilti, that they had on us. And they've been a great company to be acquired by. I'm very stoked about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. You speak very passionately about it as well. I was going to ask about like how the culture shifts perhaps between how many people were at Fieldwire like that translated into Hilti, and was it like a major culture shock for you and these people, or was it like very much a continuum?
I think we were about 100, 150 when we got acquired. Today we're 350.
Wow.
So I don't think it was too bad of a culture shock. So I think the way it worked is they gave us full autonomy to operate the company, meaning that for the exec team, probably like just my co-founder and I, and probably the top 5-10 people with us, like we were the interface. We were in the interface to get it done. And it's essentially what we told them is, if the biggest risk we have is that revenue growth flattens or even drops. That was the biggest fear that I have. And that is the signal to people that, the company is slowing down. It's not exciting anymore. And it's time to go look for another job. And the reality, so I told them, like, the most important thing for me is that we have enough autonomy that we can keep operating the company super well and we keep growing. And here's the thing. It just completely accelerated after the acquisition. Fieldwire, in the life of Fieldwire, maybe not at the very early when we had like no revenue. We've never had a down month on AR. Like every month has been a gross month. And I think we've done even better than that. Like now the company is just growing incredibly fast. And so, everybody has opinion on whether the company is doing well or not. At some point, if you can point at the revenue and it's good, and if you can point at the key product metrics around stability and performance and it's good, at some point you can tell people like every indicator is in the green. Like just there's no reason to believe that we're slowing down. And so that was great because we didn't lose anyone on the acquisition. And now like that the founders are gone, we have a killer team of exec in place. And once again, retention has been very good. To be honest, there's also another population. Like there's 200 people at Fieldwire that weren't there at the time of the acquisition. And so for them, it's probably less meaningful as well. So they're really attached to the way the company is after the acquisition. And for them, that's all the Fieldwire they know. And so it's great. Yeah, retention has been solid. So that's one thing that made me happy.
What would be your piece of advice for people negotiating a acquisition deal?
So I think
with the goal of the biggest outcome.
So the number one thing is companies are bought, not sold. I mean, people repeat it, but the reason why people repeat it so much is that even when people hear it, they don't actually listen. And, they try to pitch their company around to get it acquired, and they end up in those discussions with people that don't really want to buy. So Fieldwire, every time we raised money from the Series A onward, we had acquisition offers at the time where we raised money. And sometimes those were very serious acquisition offers. Sometimes those were more, somebody is dabbling, but they can't make up their mind. And so this is why we've always liked having those discussions around fundraise, because it was always, hey, let's have a good discussion. We are raising concurrently. If we close our raise before this discussion is over, for sure it's not happening. And so there were multiple moments like that where somebody approached the company with reasonable offers, but not to the point where they wanted to close it, or there wasn't enough desire for us to go with them. So I think that's the first point. The second point is, even if your company is bought, it doesn't mean that you have to be reactive to the deal. So in the case of Hilti, they had never acquired a startup. And the way they wanted to approach it was probably not the way we would have approached it. It would have been extremely time consuming, and it would have been extremely time consuming before we would have gotten to a decision on, are we doing this or are we not doing this? And so basically for us as startup people, we can talk to millions of people that have gone through deals like that. And so we were very structuring in the way the meetings were organized. So once again, just build something hyper valuable. And at the end of the day, they have to want you really bad. But the fact that they want you really bad doesn't mean that they know how to buy you. And so then after that, you can structure the deal. And it's the same thing when you're selling software to big companies. They're not professional software buyers. They know what they need, but the way to structure a negotiation or an evaluation is not something that our customers have selected their employees on. They've selected their employees on being great builders or great engineers or whatever, not on being great software buyers. And so we have to play a proactive role in organizing those discussions to make sure that they go well. So those were the two advice.
Okay.
Nice.
I also wanted to ask you about how did you come about packaging the pricing that you have got and how to structure pricing for custom contracts?
Okay, so I think the first realization we had was GCs pay by project, or they sync on a project basis, because a different project is a different owner, so you're going to have to rebuild a different guy. And subs sync by the volume of their activity. And so very quickly, because we're so sub-focused, it became clear that like a per project pricing was not very, very effective, right? So usually the way it works with a customer is if you're buying on the lower side of seats in Fieldwire, I would say less than 50 seats, like we don't know anything about you. So it's really hard to do a value pricing for you. So you pay per seat, and maybe it's not super smart, but that's the way to get started. If the discussion escalates to, we have a $100 million project, we have a $1 billion project, then of course we're going to switch to a percentage of the cost of the project. And so we go usually from, and that's going to happen with GCs, we go from a per seat to a project-based pricing. And in this case, depending on the size of the project, we're talking basis points, like single or double-digit basis point. And then the greatest thing is usually you can use that pricing as an anchor to say, okay, you're paying us about that many basis points on a project basis. If you give us your entire company, I can do a better price than that. And so usually subs would transition directly from seats to a percentage of their overall activity. And GC would transition from seats to projects, and from projects to the entire company.
Okay.
Nice. Martin, should we go on to some more like general business building, where we are in construction tech now?
Well, I've got a great business building question that I was going to ask.
Go for it.
Could you do it in Europe?
That's an interesting one.
Could we sell in Europe? For sure. So Europe is a big part of our business now. Could
you build it in Europe?
That's a good question. You're asking a guy who left France to come to the US.
That's right.
Yeah, you're like us. You're a European, man.
Exactly. So here's the deal. I think the talent in Europe is really good. I think there is a lot of stellar talent in Europe, and it's probably, at least it was undervalued and underpriced. I think the startup ecosystem has developed quite a bit in Europe. So now I think it's caught up a little bit. But there used to be like, I think, a stellar divide. The problem of Europe is more like the employment environment and how fluid it is. I mean, so for example, being French, when we set up our European office, we of course just set up the office in Paris, in France. I would probably have set it up in Amsterdam if I had no ties, because that's a more international city in my mind. There is so much paperwork in Europe that we never had to do in the US. It's really hard. And the second thing is, the fluidity of the marketplace, I think, is an important thing. So I remember when we were very early in the company, like every headcount mattered. Like, if you have one employee that's underperforming and you have like 7 or 8 employees, that's a huge burden on the company, right? Like, and you don't have any sort of redundancy. And the reality is being able to have a discussion, being like, hey, it's not working out. Like, we're going to let you go. Here's your 2 weeks package. I mean, at that point, we're just such a weak company. Like, you don't have the luxury of paying that much more than that. I think it's critical to be able to live through those first 2 years. So I remember, to me, the first 2 years as the years where the company was the weakest. Like, if the wind was blowing a little too hard, maybe it would have carried us away and we would have been done. I never had that feeling from our Series N onwards. Like, I always felt like we had runway, we were comfortable. The company was, even if we were to do a major mistake, we would have 3 or 4 paths to recover from it. So to me, like, that's the part usually that maybe Europe could fix, is just how do you make it easier for companies to survive the first 2 years?
Interesting. Okay, Yves. I have one about about building construction tech companies in today's age. It's quite loaded, and you could come from it from multiple angles. But I think what probably is most interesting for people who would listen to something like this would be probably from a go-to-market perspective, and maybe even also you have to bring in AI into the mix and how this maybe disrupts like how products are being built and distributed.
So what's the question?
Like how your thoughts on how people should go about their go-to-market today, and how perhaps AI will disrupt how products are built and sold.
I think one of the bigger factor for go-to-market is where we are at in the cycle of bundling versus unbundling. So if you think about 2013, when we started the company, mobile just arrived. Nobody really knows what's going to be valuable on mobile. So you're at the peak of the unbundling cycle. So there's a lot of point apps that are doing small things on mobile, and people are trying to figure out what is valuable on mobile. And this is like where Fieldwire starts. We say we're field management. We're just field. We're not project management. We just focus on that narrow part of the value stack. And then, and people go through this crazy cycle of just, it works great, and then they're very disappointed, and now they have hundreds of apps, and they're trying to consolidate. And then you go from that unbundling cycle to that bundling cycle where now people want the one-stop shop, and this is where like Autodesk, Procore, and Fieldwire compete today, right? Which is, we do it all, like from field management to project management, and it's just a matter of the choice. So if you try to enter that market today with a lesser wide product, I think you're going to get crushed, because it's not greenfield anymore. There is a lot of very good, very established product out there. So AI, I think, is that next wave that's reshuffling the cards, where we don't know again what's going to be hyper valuable with AI. We have a couple of theories as to just what you can do with a good LLM or just good image, stable diffusion on AI, whatever, or classifier, whatever. And so I think you're going to see another wave of point apps that are trying very, very different use cases. And then some of those are going to get figured out. And then once again, we're going to go a little bit unbundling. Some bigger players are going to hurt a little bit, and then we're going to consolidate again. So from a distribution perspective, I would say the opportunity right now feels to me like on very narrow use case, and probably just try to integrate with a bigger platform. That's where I would see the opportunity from a distribution perspective. And once again, it's not greenfield like it was back in 2013. Like in 2013, there was nothing in the field, right?
Interesting.
What are your thoughts on exits in construction? Having done one very successfully, where is construction in terms of exits? Are there a lot?
Yeah, we don't actually have like any huge ones.
Recently, it's been a bit
in the
quieter.
industry.
I mean, it's just the market. The market right now doesn't pay very well. Like it dropped a little bit since 2023, 22. So when we started Fieldwire in 2013, we would go see VCs, and they would tell us, I remember meeting with Andreessen and Horowitz, and they were like, we love the company, we love you guys. However, we hate construction with a passion. Like they're saying every cool company in this space, company with great founders, amazing products, gets acquired for less than 100 million. And at that price, we can't run our model. And namely, they were referencing Revit, who's been like an absolutely life-changing product in construction. And I think the acquisition was probably 50, 60 million or something like that. And basically they told us, we do not invest. And we, at Fieldwire, we kept that story as the $100 million curse, which is that every construction company cannot break the $100 million mark. And then after that, you see the wave one companies, like you see us, you see PlanGrid, you see Level Set, you see just all the great companies. Like all of us have gone through that barrier. And so there is a whole set of VCs that have made a ton of money of betting on those companies. And so now construction is looked at as a very serious vertical. First of all, it's an infinite market. So they love infinite market, meaning that as long as you keep working, you're going to keep growing, assuming you don't mess up, right? It's not the fastest market, but it really is infinite from a volume perspective. The second thing that they see is there are M&A players nowadays than they used to be. So once again, like if you take French tech, for example, what is the problem with French tech is you can finance the young startup, but if you don't have the ecosystem to acquire them or exit them, it's kind of like it's not a cycle. It's more of a dead end, right? And so construction used to be like that. There was no exit that was reasonable. Like either people didn't want to pay or they didn't want to pay a fair price for the companies they were acquiring. And so nowadays that is not a problem as well. So there is plenty of interest. I mean, I'm engaged with a bunch of really good construction companies around here. And yes, there's real interest from VCs. People see construction as really a separate vertical from the rest of the economy. And that is great because it means you compete within construction. You don't tend to compete too much with other verticals. And which is rare. There's probably 3 verticals at that size where that is true. Like, like logistics, probably construction, and maybe like retail. Those have to be the large verticals that are 10% of the GDP of the world.
Cool. Okay, last question from me. One decision you made that changed everything.
When we were gearing up for the Series A, we were really low on cash. Like I remember, like some investors just gave us some, like it was coupons for custom-made Converse, and the part that was custom-made is you could put a little message on the Converse on top of picking the color. And the message I picked was 100 days. That's how much cash we had. So I had my Converse with 100 days written on it. We had 3 months of cash. And we had just tried to raise our Series A, I think, towards the end of the year, or like maybe early January. I forgot when it was exactly. And it was clear we could have closed the bridge, but I didn't like the valuation. And it just felt like that was going to be too painful for the company and that was going to hinder us long term. And so I remember like I called my co-founder and we went in a meeting room and I was like, dude, we're so close to raising a really good Series A, but we're not there yet. So we need just a little bit more time. And so what we did is like founders, we were just 5 people at the time. So me and my co-founder went on half salaries. That gave us like an extra 2 months of runway. And we raised a great Series A with Formation 8, like in, I think, just July of that year or something like that. And so that was great. I think that's the moment where the company could have died, and it survived and it did very well after that. And we never just got close to the sun after that.
Okay. How skydiving changed your way of thinking, or maybe any lessons in the business that you took from it?
So I don't know if there is a lesson, but so I was skydiving as part of a skydiving team, which was like an organization at my undergrad in France. So because we have military status, skydiving is a useful skill for the military. And so they would actually subvention us to jump. So instead of paying $50 per jump, we would pay $5. $5. We would have free gear. We would have everything. So it was amazing. So when you're a student and you have no money, that's what you want. If I look at the guys that were in that club, guys and gals, like those are my most successful startup friends. All of them are just CEO of incredible startups. And so the only thing I've learned is obviously you have to be somewhat attracted to risk, but risk that you can somehow control by
Right.
just folding your parachute better, or by just being serious in how you jump, or by respecting, some, self-preservation principles. So you want the guys that are attracted to risk, but that still have
they
enough
understand it.
self-preservation to not do just completely crazy stuff. It's incredible. I think I'm going to start a VC that's going to invest exclusively in all the people that come from the skydiving club, and I think I'm going to make bank.
Yeah, I
Wow.
love it. Love it.
Okay,
Skydive VC. Cool.
It's a good name.
What's ahead for you? Then that's my last question. Right?
So that's interesting. So I like skydiving. I like aviation as well. I'm looking at a really, really random thing, which is aeronautics around wildfire firefighting. It's clearly, so I think there's a couple of big trends. Obviously, we're going to get more fires in the years to come. Aerial firefighting is prohibitively expensive at the moment, but we have to keep doing it because we can't afford to let every city burn like Palisade in Los Angeles. The problem is that the economics just don't work very well right now. And I'm wondering if there's a way to change that. I don't know if it's a fundable space. I don't think it's a startup. It's much more of an operator space. But so, yeah, I'm taking my pilot license, trying to learn more about the regs, trying to learn more about the space. The good thing is when you fly, you meet a lot of people that are flying. A lot of them just can be in the like the crop dusting business, like agro business, or just wildfire fighting, and you can just talk to them. So it's a great way for me to meet that. And if I find it interestingly enough, or if I have an idea of how to make the economics better, I might do something there.
Great.
Very good. Yves, thank you so much. You did not disappoint.
Yeah,
All right,
great
cool.
chat.
Thank you both. This was fun.
This was good, yeah.
Thank you.